How should teachers start every day? What are the best ways to organize our workspaces? And when is the right time to leave the school building? Welcome back to another episode of the Teachers on Fire podcast, airing live on YouTube most Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern. My name is Tim Cavey, and my mission here is to warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. Today's Teacher on Fire is Liz Prather, a 30-year high school classroom teacher. Liz is the co-director of programming for the Kentucky Writing Project. She holds an MFA in fiction from the University of Texas, Austin, and is the author of 3 books about teaching writing from Heinemann Press: Project-Based Writing, Story Matters, and The Confidence to Write. You can connect with Liz on LinkedIn and on Substack. You'll find her there as well, and that's how I found her. Liz, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Are you, my friend, ready to light it up?
I'm ready to light it up, Tim. Let's go.
That's good news. Well, as I said to you off air, I've been away from this show for a little while, so I'm a little rusty, but I'm so thankful that you are here with me this morning, and I'm back in the studio, as I like to call it. You recently published a post on Substack titled 5 Small Rituals to Save You in the Coming School Year, and I'm thrilled that you've agreed to share them with my Teachers on Fire audience. So are you, Liz, ready to get into them this morning?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so we're talking about 5 daily rituals that you can practice, my friend. Teacher on Fire, wherever you are. These are simple and universal, and I do believe they're going to be helpful in your practice. So Liz, take us into the first one, arrive early. Tell us about that.
So let me just, before, I want to give some context to your listeners. I work as a coach in the schools now. I'm retired from active teaching, had a wonderful career for 30 years, and I do some coaching in the entire Commonwealth of Kentucky. We have 120 counties. We have lots of schools, different rural schools, inner city, urban schools, private schools, charter schools. And so what we know right now is a point in education. There are a lot of teachers that are retiring that have this kind of institutional knowledge that is not taught in colleges of education and is not taught in teacher training programs. And we have a lot of teachers. In fact, many of the schools that I'm in right now have 75% of their workforce have 3 or less years behind a classroom desk. Wow. So, when you think about that, and Tim, you probably know this, you don't hit your stride until you're 3 years into a job, right? You don't, especially in education, you really don't hit your stride. You don't understand you're just trying to stay one step ahead of the students. I think that first year, you're trying to figure out all your systems and your protocols. And so I decided to write the Substack because these are the kinds of things that no one really tells young teachers that will save their energy for the things that really matter and not break them down and burn them out at the beginning. So that's kind of the context that I wanted to share with your listeners. The very first one is to arrive early. Now that may sound like something that is actually detracting from energy, but it actually restores teachers in a way because it reduces the stress. And so my story is the last 15 years, I had a 45-minute commute. I live in a rural community, but I had to drive to urban school that I spent the last 15 years of my career in. And so if I left early, I missed the rush hour traffic. It was very peaceful. I would get to school. No one was at the copier. I could find a good parking space. I did not have to come into the school rushed and overstressed by traffic or by just not having time enough to get my plans written on the board or what have you. The amount of time it took me to kind of unlimber, make a pot of tea, just wait for the students to show up, really allowed me time to breathe. And it really allowed me to ground myself and center myself so that I could impact my day in a way that was really positive.
I resonate with that so much. I leave my home obscenely early, Liz, but by doing so, I get a really quick commute and I avoid accidents and jam ups on the highway. And as a result, just as you described, I come into the day feeling great and relaxed and I wouldn't trade that for anything. So I'm going to second that. Let's get into daily ritual 2. Take 5 for yourself. What does this look like for you?
So I'm a writer, and so I I often describe myself, or I ask teachers to describe themselves. Are you a teacher who sometimes writes on the weekends, or are you a writer who gets their health insurance through teaching? So that's a real framing, right? If you think about yourself in one of those two ways. Um, but I'm a writer who got her health insurance through teaching. Loved my career, absolutely loved it, but I always identified as a writer primarily. So the 5 minutes for me looked like writing. So I would come in early, I would unpack, I would put my plans on the board, I would make myself some tea or some coffee, and then I would sit down, and I had a variety of ways that I would do this. If I was working actively on a book, I would just open up a blank Google document and start typing some things that I knew were on my mind during that commute, kind of download some ideas that I had for the book. If I wasn't writing on a book actively, I would just journal. I may pull out a book, put out a composition book or a spiral bound notebook or something, and just write some things that I hope to accomplish during the day, kind of set some intentions for myself. But the end of the day, I also took 5 minutes to write. And that was very different than my morning because it was all documentation. So it had everything to do with what had happened during the day. So its purposes were serving reflection for me, what went well, what didn't go well, and documentation. Maybe a to-do list. I need to call these 3 parents. I need to circle back around with a student for do some revision pieces or what have you. And that was kind of my to-do list for the next day. So they serve 2 different purposes. If you're not a writer, if you're a young teacher and you're like, oh my God, I can't imagine coming to school and then spending 5 minutes writing, maybe you want to, do a brisk walk around the gym, or maybe you want to create a gratitude list, or do some light therapy, or say a prayer, or meditate, or deep breathing even. I really think, though, just saying I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes and this is going to be my time is really critical.
Writing isn't going to be for everyone. I know you would agree. I'm assuming you would probably agree with that. But I do agree that if you want to write, and I'm one of those educators that enjoys the writing process, it's great to keep it going every day. So even just a few minutes, right, Liz? Keeping our minds in the groove and getting back to different thoughts. And as you said, getting down whatever we were thinking about on that commute into the building makes such a difference in terms of our output and writing productivity through the week. Now let's talk about how can we organize our room, organize our space for efficiency. What did you do to really make your space efficient?
So efficiency will look different for every teacher, but we know research shows that a cluttered workspace actually increases stress for teachers, and it also increases stress for students. Whether they're aware of that or not, on some unconscious level, they know when there's like a lot of clutter around in a classroom. I think organizing your room is a stress reduction strategy, but you have to organize it in a way that is efficient for the workflow that you have. So it will look different, obviously, for an elementary school teacher than a middle school science teacher than a high school creative writing teacher. So if you have supplies that students use and you have those in bins, label the bins so that students don't have to ask you where the supplies are. That's pretty basic, right? I liked to organize my room because I had a lot of different activities throughout the day. I would have small groups when we would be working with reading or station work. So I had to create sections of the room that served that purpose. I also had a little library nook where I had like a little coffee hutch where the kids could make coffee or tea if they wanted it. They had to get permission from their parents to do this, and they had to pay $20 to do it. But it was a really cool thing, and they loved it. And they actually took very great care to not break that privilege. So if they wanted to do that, that was during individual studio time. So they had chunks of time during the week where they could just write independently. And so that area served for that purpose. In another corner, I may have a very small like seating arrangement where I would be working with students on tier 3 instruction, where I was doing some tier 3 intervention. I had a long table near the window with lots of supplies where students who were working on projects could work together. And then I also had a rolling storage cart that had 10 drawers. So I had a drawer for um, papers that needed to be graded and papers that needed to be returned. Now, that was early in my career when I had that. I kept it. It became obsolete the last 3 years of my teaching career because I was basically 90% paperless. So I did mostly everything digitally. But that was one of the things, if you're still working with paper, that's one of the things, just keeping that paper tiger managed is really important.
So good. And so many of those are maybe common sense for primary teachers, I feel like, Liz. But as you get into middle and secondary, some of those basic common sense organization tips fall away. And you're right. Just making sure everything has its place is so helpful. And I like what you said too about even for the students. I mean, they can
Right.
sense the difference when they come in and learn in the space. Teachers on Fire, if you're joining us on this Saturday morning, thank you. If you're finding value in this conversation, go ahead and like the video on whatever platform you are joining us on. Liz, let's talk about looking out for your future self. What are some of the small moves we can make that make it easier for our future self when maybe we are tight on time or in a stressful situation?
So I'm going to give you a scenario and I want you to tell me what you
Okay.
would do.
Oh, no.
You've worked hard all day.
Yeah.
You had an after school faculty meeting. Then you had some tutoring. You had some students come by your class and you were tutoring. You had a parent conference. You were exhausted. You had to pick up your own children from soccer practice. And you look and you're getting ready to pull into your wherever apartment, subdivision, wherever you live. And you notice your gas tank is on empty.
Mm.
What do you do?
Well, I probably would, and I maybe know where you're going with this, but I probably would muster up the energy to go fill that tank because that next morning, that's not going to be good if I have to stop for gas.
Okay, so I love this. You said monster up the energy. Is that what you said?
Muster
Oh,
up the
monster.
energy. Yeah.
Okay, I like monster too. I'm going to monster up the energy. It
Yes.
is a moment of discipline. It is
Right.
a moment of discipline where you're
Yes.
actually saying, I'm going to defer like the pain right now. I'm going to move beyond the pain of doing one more thing in this
Right.
exhausting day because I know in my morning self, my future self, I also will be pressed for time and it'll be the morning. And I have all those things I have to do in the morning and I want to get to school early. So deferring that gratification of hitting the couch and ordering a pizza and doing things like that, you instead go ahead and fill up your car with gas. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about thinking about your future self. So pushing tasks like out into the future is really unfair to yourself. It really puts an undue burden and it creates stress. And again, all these things are like tips, but they're basically all stress reduction strategies. We do this in terms of health all the time, in terms of our physical health. So I'm 58 years old and I just started strength training with a trainer. So I'm lifting all these kettlebells and dumbbells and things like that. It's because I want to be able to lift my groceries when I'm 80 years old. It's because I want to be able to walk up the stairs or walk at my favorite park or what have you. So we do this health wise, but mentally with teachers, I think if we do these kinds of things, just address the task as immediate as you can. Not perfect, but get it done.
Yeah, and in your article, you talk about some of the practical steps we can take. Things like making extra copies of forms that you know you'll need, creating a binder of emergency lesson plans and rosters. I love that idea of the emergency lesson plans. I've encouraged colleagues to do the same. And keeping a small stash of snacks and emergency lunches, I think, makes so much sense. One asterisk I wanted to add there, Liz, is that I feel like every building I'm in, there's a bit of a struggle with mice. And so you just have to be careful about that stash of snacks to keep it well sealed so you're not inviting some of our small furry friends overnight. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Last daily ritual is leave school within an hour of the last bell. Talk about why this is important.
This is a one that took me a long time to learn. I thought I was doing myself a favor. I thought I was really showing my team that I was, a go getter, that I was ambitious. And it ended up by year 5, 6, 7, it was so taxing to me because I had become routinized to that. And I had
Mm,
become like, if I left even an hour early, I felt like, it was a shameful thing, or I don't know where that came. I don't know where that comes from. I'm an Enneagram 3. So I don't know if you know anything about Enneagrams, but we're very project oriented. We're very driven to that. So about mid-career, probably around year 10, I just made a decision. I'm not staying here an hour after the bell rings. Not 1 hour, not 1 minute after the hour am I going to stay. Now, obviously I stayed for faculty meetings or parent teacher conferences, but if you're working 3 or 4 or 5 hours after your contracted time, you're positioning yourself for burnout. I mean, there's nothing that can be done in those 3 or 4 hours that can't wait until the next day, and or can't wait till the weekend. And again, that's not contracted time, but you have a little bit more leisure. You're a little bit more leisurely to do those things if you need to get those done. I do think, and I will tell you this: all the young teachers that I work with that are in this that are have 3 or under years, they don't have the problem with work-life balance that we did or that I did. I can't speak for you, but these young teachers that I am mentoring and coaching, they really get this. They understand. There is something about that generation of teachers. They totally understand the idea of work life balance. And if it doesn't get done an hour after school's over, it just doesn't get done. And they just move on with their day. So I think it's really critical. And I think it's a real positive that they do that.
I completely agree. I do see that generational shift or divide where I am as well. And I think, hey, more power to them. That's something really important, and it'll help sustain them over the long term. I don't know if you're familiar with this idea of, I think it's called Parkinson's Law, but wow, if you say to yourself, I'm going to stay at the school building until I'm finished everything, look out, because everything is sort of infinite when you're a teacher. So I like that hard and fast rule of 1 hour after the bell. Liz, I've got a few more minutes with you, and I want to pivot now into writing. You are an expert in this space, so tell us, what's one idea that you've been thinking about lately in terms of your approach to writing instruction in 2025?
Okay. I love this question. The big shift for me in 2025 is the need for students to understand that writing is a uniquely human activity. Okay. That it is a privilege to write, it is a privilege to create. So I think, particularly when we think about our age in like generative AI, you can type in a prompt and it'll spit out an argument, spit out a narrative, an informational text. You know, Students need to know that writing is not just something we do for school. It's not just an academic exercise. It's a heart exercise. It's a human thinking, feeling experience. That's the shift that has to take place. Because if it's not that, then we can just, give up and let the machines do that work. And and you know, I think there was a and I actually wrote a Substack about this as well. During the Olympics, there was a Google's generative AI tool called Gemini, and it showed this advertisement came on during the Olympics where there was a father talking to his young daughter about her adoration for a celebrity track and field Olympiad, and she wanted to write a letter to this celebrity, this hero of hers. And so the father encourages the daughter to get on Google's Gemini and allow the AI to write a fan letter.
Mm.
And I just thought, this is the lowest, this is the nadir, this is, it's the one thing that you can do as a human is to be able to express your love for another person in a letter, right? And so it's your voice, it's your life, it's relevance, it's your value, it's your worth. All that comes out in writing. And so my big push is to convince students that this is an activity. If we give it up, we're giving up ourselves.
Oh, that was quotable and clippable. Thank you so much for that, Liz. I will add my applause to that. And I want to get back to something you mentioned earlier in the conversation. You talked about how you are a writer who uses teaching for the health insurance. I'm not getting it exactly right, but I love that idea. And I wish more teachers, even teachers of writing, saw themselves as writers. So,
Right.
what's your encouragement for those educators who they support student writing every day? They love that process, but maybe they doubt the value of publishing and writing their own work.
Right. So I think the world needs more teachers who are writers, and not just who are writers, but that are writing about what it's like to be a teacher and writing about their experience as teachers, but also writing about their content, and writing about their practice. I think that is really, really critical. Teachers are just not good at their own PR. They're not good at promoting themselves and advocating for themselves when it comes to that. I think there's some dynamite teachers. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to dynamite teachers, and when I suggest that they write a book, they're like, "Oh, I really don't know anything." I was like, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I just saw you like convince a group of sixth grade boys to read a sonnet. What are you talking about? You're a magician, you know?" So I think every teacher has a book in them. Every teacher has a book in them. And I think that when I was writing my first book, there were so many things that I did intuitively, Tim, in my classroom. I did it without thinking. It's a gut thing. You kind of know. It's like there's a tipping point in a class where you know they're about ready to slip into some kind of mayhem, and you just sense it, and you slide in with something, and you're on the fly doing some kind of instructional strategy that you just pulled out of the back of your head. Well, when you have to write about that and you have to actually articulate what it is that you do, it is so hard. And every teacher needs to have that opportunity to do that. So, I would encourage any teacher to write, number one. I would encourage any teacher to write about their practice. But if you are interested in writing fiction, even or nonfiction, it's just such a beautiful, it's a creative outlet. And it also gives you credibility in the classroom when you can
Right.
share your own work with, if you're a writing teacher, an English teacher, and you can share your own work as a model. Um, for example, I think the deadline is passed, but the English Journal, which is the National Council of Teachers of English, it's their journal. They have a call for submissions every quarter. And September 1st, I think, was the deadline, but they were asking teachers to write about how do they use true crime podcast and mystery novels in their classroom. And they wanted teachers to send in articles about how they did that. And I thought, what a great opportunity to write about something that's not really covered before. So I don't know. Look on the call for submission for some of your favorite journals and send your stuff out because the world needs your voice.
So good. And Liz, before we go, I want to talk about the three books that you've written. And I think this third one actually has that connection. So let me just read the three titles for my audience. In 2017, you put out Project-Based Writing. In 2019, Story Matters, teaching teens to use the tools of narrative to argue and inform. And then most recently in 2024, if I have that date correct, you wrote The Confidence to Write, a guide for overcoming fear and developing identity as a writer. So just quickly on that last one, is that the right book for that teacher that we just talked about, that teacher who's thinking about putting their own writing into the publishing sphere, let's say? Is that book going to be helpful for them on their journey?
It will. So I wrote it as much for teachers to overcome their own fear of writing as I did for students for overcoming their fear. So one of the features of that book is something called a meta write, where I'm asking students to write about writing. So to think about their history as writer and their influence as a writer and their fears of writing. But with every student meta write that I offer, I also offer a teacher meta write. So you have to convince sometimes, I think, teachers to overcome their own fear of writing or their own fear of thinking about, like my ability to be able to teach this thing that's so idiosyncratic. It has a process, right? But every process is somewhat different. And so I'm not sure if I know how to lead another person if I don't know how to actually articulate my own process. And so I would encourage teachers, if even if you're not a teacher of writing, pick up the confidence to write if you would like to write more, because there are 50 different meta writes in there, and they're wonderful prompts that just allow teachers to think about what it is and how they write and how they think.
So good. And it sounds like, as you said, that would be helpful in the classroom and out. That's inspiring me to continue on my own writing journey. So thank you so much, Liz. Again, I'm grateful to have connected with you. And speaking of that, where are the best places for Teachers on Fire listening and watching to this episode? Watching this episode, where are the best places for them to connect with you and hear more about your work?
So I'm not really into the socials, but I do have a Substack. So writingteacher.substack.com. You can find me there. And I'm kind of like what you said. It's kind of hard. Like you have this intention. I'm going to do this every month. And then 3 months go by and you're like, oh, I haven't written a Substack. But typically I write about, it's just me talking about writing and talking about lesson plans. A lot of times I'll put a lesson plan up, or I'll talk about education in general. And it is free. I don't have any subscribers. That's something that I'm interested in actually moving into in 2026. So, and offering some packets and some kits. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your practice and just reflecting on your work so openly. And I was really taken by that article. That's how I came across you. I'm glad to be connected. And Teachers on Fire, if you're not connected to Substack as a platform, maybe you're hearing that word for the first time, I'd encourage you to go on over to Substack and start an account, create an account. It's very quick and easy to do so. And you'll be able to connect with people like Liz and me and others who are writing about their practice. Well, Liz, thank you again for sharing your time with the podcast today. This has been fun and inspiring. Teachers on Fire. I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you decided to spend some of your day listening to this episode. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Liz Prather sparked your thinking and ignited your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye. Hustle hard, hustle every single day.